Cheating the EPA is great for drivers, but it is horrible for the environment. Here is what Donut Media missed in their video about Dieselgate. Hello and welcome back to Gears and Tech. If you're like me, you recently watched Donut Media's video talking about Dieselgate. I personally was really excited to see the video reviewing Dieselgate, but at the end, I was a little disappointed that they focused so much on the fines and the penalties and all of that, and didn't talk so much about the whys, and more importantly, what it means to you as a consumer. So I want to answer a number of questions through this video, and I hope you stick around with me till the end to see everything I have to say about Dieselgate that Donut Media missed in their video. Hey, before we get too far into this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel down below. If you have been to this channel at least one time before, that means that this is your second time and you are still not subscribed. Obviously, you're enjoying this content. Obviously, YouTube wants you to see this content because you're seeing it again. We have a lot of return visitors, but we're not getting the subscribers like we hoped we would. We're counting on you to subscribe so we can make better content. So, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the like button and the bell. This algorithm will just get blown out of the water and it'll just tell the whole world, I like this video. And with that, let's get back to the content. Now, one thing I do want you to know is that I am not making this video because I think that Donut Media screwed up. I'm not making this video because I think I'm better than them. I do think I have a unique perspective on the other side of the coin that I really want to share. And I hope that if you haven't seen the video, go ahead and watch it. I'm not going to make a video like theirs, so they did a really good job with their video. But here's the parts that they missed and the parts that you should know as just a regular car enthusiast or just somebody that's curious about technology. I do have my laptop today because I will be referencing some notes and figures and stuff because I do want to try and keep this as fact-based as possible. I will have my opinion in here as well. So first of all, before we go too far into this, what is Dieselgate? I'm gonna read here directly from Wikipedia. The Volkswagen emission scandal, sometimes known as Dieselgate or Emission-Gate, began in September 2015 when the EPA had found that Volkswagen had intentionally programmed turbocharged direct injection, TDI, diesel engines to activate their emissions controls only during laboratory emissions testing, which caused the vehicle's NOx output to meet US standards during regulatory testing, while they emitted up to 40 times more NOx in real-world driving. Volkswagen deployed the software in about 11 million cars worldwide, including 500,000 in the United States in model years 2009 through 2015. That's a huge span that they covered their cars, and there's a lot of cars that are covered here. Let's explain the problem. The problem was that they were cheating and they openly bragged about it. I'll put this into perspective. Let's pretend that you're running the Tour de France and you are a famous cyclist. Maybe you've heard this story before. And while you're riding in the Tour de France, you participate in an act known as blood doping, which is illegal. It's highly illegal because it's an unfair advantage that you would have over the other cyclists. But cheating alone isn't good enough for you. You also need to brag about how awesome you are and then win the Tour de France and then pretend like you weren't doping the whole time and cheating. Of course, everyone's gonna wanna try to figure out how you're doing so awesome when it just doesn't seem to add up. You seem to just be doing so much better than everyone else, when really everyone kind of expects what the human body is capable of. So then they start to explore, are they cheating? Could they be cheating? I don't know. That leads us back to Volkswagen. the science didn't add up. Here's the thing about the science, without getting too sciencey into this, because I'm not a chemist and I don't know chemistry, but I do understand the principles of science how it relates to an engine. The biggest thing that you should know, just to simplify it all down, pollution is inversely proportionate to fuel economy. That means if you have really good fuel economy, you also will have very high pollution. There's a balancing act going on here where we're trying to balance the best fuel economy we can get while still staying within the acceptable levels of pollution. If we go really poorly for fuel economy, your pollution will also drop significantly. But that's not what's at play here. In Volkswagen's case, they were claiming amazing fuel economy while also claiming exponentially good environmental ratings. And this is where the science just wasn't adding up. It was confusing a lot of people because everything we knew about the NOx levels and the hydrocarbons and all of the pollutants that come out of your tailpipe and how it relates to fuel economy, it just wasn't making any sense. Now I'll explain this a little bit deeper so that you can follow me here. So the combustion ratio of diesel is generally believed to be around 14.5 to 1 air-fuel ratio. What that means in plain terms is you have 14.5 parts of air and you have 1 part of diesel fuel. And when you mix those together, you will get what's called a stoichiometric burn. Stoichiometric burn, in theory, means that's the amount of air and fuel required to have a perfect burn, meaning all of the fuel molecules are burned and the air is totally spent. Also, at 14.5 or stoic, you should expect that you would meet the EPA guidelines with respect to how much NOx gases are released out of your tailpipe, and you would be able to meet those requirements. However, at stoichiometric air-fuel ratio, when we're talking about diesel or gas, a gasoline engine is generally 14.7, so they're very close. But at 14.5 or 14.7, there's not a lot of fun to be had. Your car will not be creating peak horsepower. It will not be creating peak torque. It will not be very good for fuel economy. It will be a dull, boring car that doesn't do a lot of things well, but it does save the environment. And that's where that balancing act comes in. Because it's not very fun, you rarely will actually be at stoic at any point while you're driving your car. You just aren't. Typically, in a gasoline engine car, you're gonna be running somewhere between 16 and 18 and maybe as much as 20 to 1 AFR, air-fuel ratio. In the case of a diesel car, it's even higher or more lean, and that would be at anywhere from 20 to 1 and as high as 70 to 1. 70 parts of air to 1 fuel molecule. So when you throw out any kind of regulatory standards or guidelines, that allows you to tune strictly for horsepower, torque, performance. You can move the torque curve around wherever you want, and you can create a very fun, exciting experience and still get exceptionally good fuel economy. And that's why actually, if you watch some of my other videos where I talk about tuning for fuel economy and tuning for performance, I talk specifically about how we're not going to be tested by the EPA for my personal car. And so I can ignore those to some extent and focus strictly on drivability. And that's why tuning companies still are around to this day, because generally they just make their tune for when they want to have fun. And if they know they're about to go and get tested for pollution levels or something like that, you just put the factory tune back on, you passed with flying colors, and then you go back and put your performance tune back on. Unfortunately, that's always to the detriment of the environment. Your pollution levels will always go up and up and up and through the roof. In Volkswagen's case, it was 40 times higher than what the EPA allowed as a regulatory standard. So pollution was crazy. but fuel economy was also really awesome. So how did Volkswagen pull it off? What was the tech behind the Volkswagen emissions trick? That's the part that when I first read about it, I had some guesses about how they did it, but I actually read in more depth how they actually did it, and it is amazing. It's actually quite intelligent what they're able to pull off. So the simple term is that Volkswagen installed a software that would test for certain parameters to decide, am I being tested for EPA regulations? If the answer comes back as yes, then they go into a special mode where they run in that mode to make sure that they meet all of those requirements. As soon as they let the vehicle off of the equipment and they put it back out on the street, it does the test again. And it says, oh no, mom and dad aren't around. You can go ahead and do whatever you want. So then that Volkswagen goes, yeah. And then boom, into the performance and fuel saving tune rather than the save the environment tune. But in order to understand exactly how Volkswagen pulled it off, we need to actually back up a little bit and talk about how the EPA actually tests for meeting their requirements. So because the EPA, there is a group made up of scientists, really smart people, and smart people are really anal. And anal people really like their processes and procedures, and they need to make sure that it's repeatable. If you're a man of science, you know you're not gonna go and do experiments outside with the wind blowing, it might be raining, you wanna control that. So the EPA also wants to control it. So they pull the car into a controlled environment, they roll it up onto some sort of a cradle that has rollers underneath the wheels that allows you to keep the car in place, hook up really expensive high-tech equipment, and take the readings in a controlled environment. So they control the environment as much as possible so that the test results are repeatable and they are indisputable. Because of that, Volkswagen is able to know, I've just been rolled up onto a thing. The wheels are spinning, but the car's not going anywhere. Sometimes they have rolling ones where it only picks up the drive wheels. So if the Volkswagen's sitting like this and it's doing 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles an hour, it knows it's being tested. So they detect stuff like that. You would say, aha, that's highly illegal. Why would you make settings that adjust the car's performance for a test? The sophistication of cars these days, they actually have to create an EPA testing mode anyway. Like manufacturers have to do that. It's not like Volkswagen's the only one making a test environment mode in the car. Specifically when you're dealing with cars that have traction control. So if the back wheels are not spinning and the front wheels are, or if it's a rear wheel drive the other way around, or they're not spinning at the same rate, then it'll cause all kinds of issues with your traction control, your ABS, your stability, and all of that. So they have to some extent, be able to say, I am in test mode. There's also so many parameters that they need to set up in order to perform this test that the car would know quite definitively if it was in a test environment or if it was not. And that's why they were able to detect that they were in a test mode and then go and make adjustments. Now, the way that they did the adjustments were actually very deeply hidden in the programming, so it made it difficult to find, and most manufacturers have the root of their code locked up so that nobody can see, because it's a protected work. You're not allowed to just go and access it, and they don't need everyone to be accessing it. So it is locked up and hidden away behind passwords and firewalls and whatever else you want to call it. Now, there are a lot of people that have hacked those so that you can do your own tuning, and that would be required to bypass that in order to see it. But I don't want to go down that path today, because today is strictly talking about what was missed and what you need to know. So what did it do when it knew it was being tested? Well, the short answer is very simple. We talked about stoichiometric ratio and meeting the EPA standards. Basically, once it decided I am being tested, I know without a doubt I'm being tested, it just dumped extra fuel into that car. And when we dump extra fuel, the engine runs cleaner. When the engine runs cleaner, you pass with flying colors. But that created a new problem. It wasn't adding up. How was Volkswagen achieving such great fuel economy numbers while achieving impossible emissions numbers? It just didn't add up. It still didn't add up. And it didn't sit right with a lot of people. So that leads into the point about the whistleblowers. Now, if you did watch the Donut Media video talking about Dieselgate, you know that other manufacturers were also called out for cheating. Mercedes was called out, Daimler Chrysler was called out, there was a number of others that were called out, and they did not get nearly as many fines as Volkswagen did. There's a number of factors for that. Most notably is just the sheer number of cars affected. They had it on a lot of cars over a lot of years before they got caught. The environmental impact was great, and they needed to be taught a lesson about, screwing around with regulatory bodies. You gotta send that message. Also, these other companies that were cheating the system were not cheating it in the same way or to the same degree. And if I go back to my original analogy, talking about how they were not only cheating, but they were openly bragging about it, it just makes you a bigger target. If you would just cheat and sit in the back and mind your own business and be like, yeah, we're pretty awesome, but I don't want to talk about it. That's one thing. But when you're standing there boasting, look at us, we're so much smarter than you, we're so much better than you, we get good fuel economy and we're saving the planet. Well, that makes everyone else wonder, how are they doing it? Especially when you've got companies like Mercedes. They already knew they were cheating. They're sitting there saying, we're cheating and we still can't touch the numbers that Volkswagen is getting. Dodge, Daimler, Chrysler, they said the same thing. Holy crap, we're fudging our own numbers and we can't even get half as close as you guys. How are you doing it? Nobody wants to admit that they're smarter than you, so they must also be cheating, and they must also be cheating worse. And they knew it. That's where the rolling road tests came in. So how did they catch Volkswagen? Well, first they started with the theory. It just doesn't add up. Nothing makes sense. So they did some testing in the normal EPA environment and the numbers came back proper. But what they found was wildly inaccurate readings when they took to the street and reproduced the test with a little thing clipped on the exhaust trying to measure the emissions. And what they had to do, they knew that they were not doing this test within this controlled environment. So they knew there had to be some variation in the results, and we knew that they would be typically worse. That was okay. But the results that they were getting were so widely outside of the expected range that they became more and more confident that something shady was going on. More and more companies were doing independent testing, and then the EPA was called in. EPA was forced to adopt an old way of testing that they had said was not good enough to meet their stringent requirements. Remember, they're anal scientists. They want to make sure everything's controlled, and you can't control it when you're outside. But they finally relinquished and said, okay, we have no choice. If we're going to prove this, we obviously have to go out in the open road. So they did, they performed their tests, and they didn't know to what extent Volkswagen was cheating. And that's why originally, when they went and said, aha, Volkswagen, you're cheating, Volkswagen was like, no, we're just really smart and we're really good at what we do, and that's not our problem. Because they were so confident that their code was so deep that nobody would ever find it. And it took a while because they weren't sure. They knew that something was up, but they didn't know what, and they didn't know to what extent, and they couldn't prove it. Finally, they devised ways to prove it even better, and I'm not gonna get into that, but eventually Volkswagen came clean and said, okay, fine, you caught us, we were cheating, what's the penalty? And then they were shocked to find out how many billions of dollars it was gonna cost them. So as an enthusiast myself, with a background in coding and programming, I was extremely fascinated by how they did it, why they did it, how they hit it, and the methods that they used. So I've really dug into more of the details of how that all happened, and it is extremely fascinating from a technical standpoint. This reminds me of a quote from my favorite mathematician, Ian Malcolm, who specialized in chaos theory. And he said they were so busy trying to figure out if they could do it that nobody stopped to ask if they should. And I think that's the problem that Volkswagen had. They were so smart, they were too smart for their own good, and nobody ever stopped them to say, hey, hold on a minute, that's like really bad. That's really, really wrong. We're lying to a lot of people. It might even be illegal. Someone could go to jail over this. But they were so blind to their genius that they thought no one would figure it out. It took a long time. Someone did figure it out. Now, the thing that I promised you at the beginning of the video was tying it all into what does that mean to you? We've already established that there's cars on the road that are polluting 40 times more than they're supposed to. They're getting crazy high fuel economy, and Volkswagen actually issued a recall to fix the problem. What does fixing the problem look like? Well, it's not good for consumers, but it is great for the environment. So let's talk about what it is and what your options are. Basically, they remove the EPA testing guidelines that puts it into ultra safe environmental mode at the cost of fuel economy. If you take your car in to be upgraded, you will notice your fuel economy will drop significantly. And that's the cost of saving the environment. It just is. You can't get 100 miles to the gallon and save the environment in a diesel-powered car or a gasoline-powered car. You might have to switch to electric-powered cars if you need to save the environment. But as a consumer, you really have two choices. In my opinion, you have two choices. Number one, look for somebody who's selling a car between 2009 and 2015 that has not had the upgrade, and drive it, kill the environment, but save a fortune on gas. Okay, that's one option. If you're hearing this and you're like, holy crap, Anton, what the heck are you telling these people to do? You're telling them to just ruin the environment? What about our children? What about our grandchildren? Who are you? You're a horrible human being. For those people that are watching this video, I would challenge you to also go and find these cars that are polluting the environment at up to 40 times the EPA guidelines. Buy that car, the one that hasn't been updated, the one that the guy proudly says in the ad, this one has not been fixed. Go and buy that car and immediately drive it to the dealership and have them perform that update immediately, and then sell that car again. Get that car off the road, get that polluting hunk of junk, get it gone. You don't even have to lose any money. You can make it your life mission to find these cars, buy these cars, upgrade them, and then sell them for exactly what you bought it for, knowing that that's one less car off the road that's killing the environment. And that's how you can get involved. If my previous suggestion infuriates you, this is how you can take action. So you can put a comment down below saying, Anton, I'm really upset with you, but I love the idea. And I'm gonna start searching right now. Or if you're watching this and you're like, holy crap, Anton, you totally missed the boat. What about this? What about that? What about that? Put that in the comments too. I can make a follow-up video if I missed something, if you feel I wasn't thorough enough in a certain area. If you do have questions, go ahead and post those comments below. If you have thoughts, whatever, put it in the comments. I do read all of the comments. I enjoy the community that's building here, and I like to have some good, healthy, clean debate. Don't start calling people names. Don't start telling people they're idiots. Let's just have a nice civil conversation, and I'd love to talk about it. So that's all I wanted to cover today. Hopefully you feel a little bit more intelligent around Dieselgate. You understand what the consequences were to the companies, and now you understand what the environmental impact and what the real circumstance for you is with respect to this whole thing. Don't forget to check out some of our other videos over here. We do have a lot of great content in that back library, and I'd love for you to check it out. This has been Gears and Tech. Until next time, have a great day.